What makes this story great? In the first episode of this new series, we're going to look at I Used to Live Here Once, a short story by the Dominican writer Jean Rhys from her collection Sleep It Off Lady, first published in 1976. We're going to read it together, then look at some of the language and its effects, and then I'll suggest some further reading if you're interested in finding out more. I Used to Live Here Once by Jean Rhys, a story set in Dominica in the Caribbean. She was standing by the river and looking at the stepping stones and remembering each one. There was the round, unsteady one, the pointed one, the flat one in the middle, the safe stone where you could stand and look around. The next wasn't so safe, for when the river was full, the water flowed over it, and even when it showed dry, it was slippery. But after that it was easy, and soon she was standing on the other side. The road was much wider than it used to be, but the work had been done carelessly. The felled trees had not been cleared away, and the bushes looked trampled. Yet it was the same road, and she walked along feeling extraordinarily happy. It was a fine day, a blue day. The only thing was that the sky had a glassy look that she didn't remember. That was the only word she could think of. Glassy. She turned the corner, saw that what had been the old pave had been taken up, and there too the road was much wider, but it had the same unfinished look. She came to the worn stone steps that led up to the house, and her heart began to beat. The screw pine was gone, so was the mock summer house called the Ojupa. But the clove tree was still there, and at the top of the steps the rough lawn stretched away, just as she remembered it. She stopped and looked towards the house that had been added to and painted white. It was strange to see a car standing in front of it. There were 2 children under the big mango tree, a boy and a little girl, and she waved to them and called, "Hello," but they didn't answer her or turn their heads. Very fair children, as Europeans born in the West Indies so often are, as if the white blood is asserting itself against all odds. The grass was yellow in the hot sunlight as she walked towards them. When she was quite close, she called again shyly, "Hello." Then, "I used to live here once," she said. Still they didn't answer. When she said for the 3rd time, "Hello," she was quite near them. Her arms went out instinctively with the longing to touch them. It was the boy who turned. His grey eyes looked straight into hers. His expression didn't change. He said, "Hasn't it gone cold all of a sudden? Do you notice? Let's go in." "Yes, let's," said the girl. Her arms fell to her sides as she watched them running across the grass to the house. That was the first time she knew. That's it. Feel free to pause the video and to think about your first impressions. If you've had a chance to think about your first impressions, my first question is, that was the first time she knew what? We don't know for sure. All that we do know is that she finds out something, but what's happened just before? She meets a boy and a little girl in front of the house where she, the narrator, grew up in. But the children don't see her, or if they do see her, they ignore her. So let's look at this bit. If they do see her, the clue is in she's about to touch the boy or his sister's shoulder. Her arms go out instinctively with the longing to touch them, and then the boy turns around. And not only does he turn around, his grey eyes look straight into hers. So this suggests that they do see her. And yet, his expression doesn't change, and he mentions to his sister that it's gone cold, and the sister agrees, and then they run away. So if they see her, they choose to ignore her. And why do they do this? It's not clear, but there are some more clues if we go back. If they don't see her, the main clues seem to be in this section here. They mention that it's gone cold, and we know that it's a fine day, a blue day. The grass is yellow from the hot sunlight. So this suggests that it's some kind of ghost story. There might be something supernatural going on, some other reason why the temperature might have suddenly dropped. It's a twist story, and the narrator appears to be a ghost, and it's the first time that she's realized. If, on the other hand, she's not dead, why would they ignore her? She seems friendly, but for some reason she is seen as different to the children. They might be afraid of her, or they might have some other reason why they don't want to acknowledge her. In which case, let's look at another description of the children as opposed to the narrator. We see here that the children are described as being very fair, as Europeans born in the West Indies so often are, as if the white blood is asserting itself against all odds. That's a very long sentence, and we could have had a full stop after children, but it carries on. The description is extended, and it's one of the longest sentences in this, otherwise quite simply constructed short story. The sentence emphasizes how fair they are, and then you've got a strong example of personification, as if the white blood is standing up for itself, as if it's alive. And of course you've got the repetition of the idea of whiteness, of fairness, fair, white. Remember, the house has been painted white. So this gives the story a different layer. Maybe they are ignoring her because she looks different to them. She's noticed that they look very fair. If she herself was very fair, it's arguable that she wouldn't even notice the children are very fair if they're the same ethnicity. So in that case, the story has a doubly powerful ending because she realizes that it's the first time she feels othered. It's the first time she's possibly experienced racism, ignored, as if you don't belong. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's quite a short story, and yet it's very powerful because of that ending, the note of mystery, and the different interpretations that we can make from the story. Another reason why I like the story is because it's short but powerful. Let's look at this section from the center of the story. On the surface of it, that's a strange way to describe a blue sky, to compare it to glass. You would normally say it's clear, it's blue, it's bright, it's sunny. You might comment on the clouds, but to compare a sky to something so solid as glass and so fragile is interesting. It then might make you think of glass cages or barriers, windows, clear and yet impenetrable, which fits in with the idea of not belonging, the idea that there might be a barrier between the narrator and the two children. Glass is also fragile, and it can be very dangerous for that reason. Glass shatters easily. And this also gives the story an undercurrent of violence. And speaking of violence, there are other words that are associated with violence in more subtle ways. When she's looking at the stepping stones, she makes a point of noting that one of them is the safe stone. The trees she notices by the road have been felled, and the bushes look trampled. So, those were some thoughts on Rhys's use of language in this compact but powerful short story. If you'd like to read more of Rhys's work, her most famous and highly acclaimed novel is Wide Sargasso Sea, which has been described as a feminist, anti-colonial response or prequel to Jane Eyre, and focuses on the story of Rochester's quote-unquote mad first wife, Antoinette Cosway, a Creole heiress. Or if you want to check out one of Rhys's earlier novels first, then I also recommend Voyage in the Dark, published in 1934, which follows a 19-year-old Anna Morgan as she attempts to make it on her own in the demi-monde of Edwardian London, having just moved there from the Caribbean. That's it for now, but please like, subscribe, comment and share if you like this sort of thing and fancy more. In the meantime, happy reading!